Welcome into the Backroads Bill Podcast. I'm Ben, and if you've been a listener to this show for a while, you've probably heard Sasquatches come up. A topic that has been something that has been brought up by myself and Bill before, and today has finally come where we're going to actually sit down and talk to somebody about Sasquatches. It's going to be super exciting. I'm very excited for this because it's not your typical story. It's not just some guy in the woods who ends up saying a story about Sasquatches. This is a very interesting story about not just Sasquatches, but spirituality as a whole. And I'm very excited to have the guest that we have in today to talk about it. And he has also been waiting a very long time to share it as well. But before we get into that story, first, a word from today's sponsor, Twigs.
North Bay Echo is proud to partner with Twigs Coffee Roasters, a part of the community since 1995. Twigs offers a wide selection of quality beans, fresh roasted in-house every day. Find your favorite specialty drinks at our espresso bar, rejuvenate with freshly squeezed juice, or treat yourself to mouth-watering selections from our gourmet deli. And don't forget our irresistible fresh baked goods, including uncompromising gluten-free options. Twigs has 5 locations to serve you, from North Bay to Sturgeon Falls to Sudbury. Order online for pickup at twigs.ca. And coming soon, you'll be able to order fresh roasted coffee beans direct to your doorstep from our distribution center in North Bay.
Well, Bill, the day has come.
The day has come, Ben, and we're so glad to have our next guest in the studio to talk about Sasquatch and from a personal lens. But we'll get that in a moment. But right across from me is Ken Dokis, and welcome, Ken, to the studio on the Backroads Bill Podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourselves before we get into and it's not a yarn, it's a real story. So let's hear a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here today. And the reason I came was because I think it's time. It was time for me to share this story. It happened quite some time ago, but like I said, it's time. Anyway, my name, like you said, my name's Ken Dokis. I'm a member of the Nipissing First Nation. I live just outside of the city of North Bay. I'm very familiar with the area. And I come from the Migizi Eagle clan of the Ojibwe, and my background is in the area of policing. I was a police officer in about 32 years. And during that time, I was also I had an opportunity to serve as a chief of police. And what we're going to discuss today, it was during those years that I was serving as a chief of police that this occurred, and that was my experience.
I can't wait to hear the story, but Sasquatch has been important to me, and of course around the world, whether it's Yeti, Sasquatch folklore and sightings have occurred, and there's no better. I've been out with Sasquatch investigators. There's a number of organizations. There's been books written on them, and I'm certainly a believer. So we're kind of glad that you're here. Ben, you were going to ask a question, I think.
I was just going to say, how long ago did this happen? When did this take place?
This happened in February 2002.
Oh, wow. So this is something you've been sitting on for a long time.
Yeah. And one of the reasons, I guess, I didn't tell a whole lot of people other than very close family and friends when it first occurred. And it was just my belief that it wasn't something that I should share because I was so excitingly honored to have been able to see what I did see. And it was something that I just held to myself. And up until the first time I kind of went public with it was at a special ceremony on the Nipissing First Nation last year, summer solstice celebration on Nipissing First Nation, where I shared my experience with the elders and the traditional people in that setting.
Tell us a little bit about in Anishinaabe culture, the importance of Sabe?
Sabe, what I'm, and I think it represents my culture. Sabe represents, it's one of the 7 grandfather teachings, which is honesty. And I believe, I truly believe that that is one of the reasons he allowed me to see him, was because I truly do consider myself an honest person. And I think obviously the spirits see that and recognize that, and I had the honor of seeing Sabe.
Well, is Sabe Sasquatch? Is that like, are they?
Sabe would be the forest person.
Oh, okay.
Person in the forest. And,
gotcha.
And he would be the.
So there is a connection between like the Sasquatch and like Indigenous culture and.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Indigenous cultures around the world have different names for it, and so we're like everything else. We see the other side of different things in movies and things like that. But then when you're outside at night or sometime in these, I call them bumps in the night or strange things, sometimes there's no explanation. And of course, it's the experience that the person has. And of course, you're going to tell us about your experience. And maybe that's a good segue now, Ken, to just set the scene for us back in February of 2002.
Okay. My family, like I said, lives in this area. So I would travel down here every so often. And at that particular time, as you know, in February at 7 a.m. in the morning, it's still dark. So I was getting on the Bearskin Airlines, flying back to Sioux Lookout. So I boarded the plane approximately 7 a.m. in North Bay, and I was flying. And the first stop was going to be in Sudbury. It was a beautiful sunrise morning. The daylight was just breaking. There was very few clouds, and I don't even remember, but I don't remember seeing any clouds in the sky. And it was in between North Bay and Sudbury that I had this sighting while on an airplane. I know you may say, how can you see that when you're flying 400 miles an hour? But I'm sure we'll get to the really exciting part of it.
Okay, we'll carry on with this. You've got my interest piqued, that's for sure.
Okay, because the flight lasts about 45 minutes to an hour between North Bay and Sudbury. And just as the plane was coming down, approaching Sudbury, I was looking out the window. There was 3 other gentlemen in the airplane, but they were all a little slumped over with their eyes closed. Wouldn't you know it? They looked like they were taking a nap. But I was wide awake. I had a good night's sleep, and I was wide awake, and I was prepared, and a lot of thoughts were going through my mind. I'm heading back to Sioux Lookout to go back to work. And as we're passing through, what I would think was just within a few miles from Sudbury, there would be a huge, I call it a mountain, but it's really a huge hill. And if you're familiar with Sudbury, there's not a lot of trees in the backwoods. You might see it when you're traveling on the highway, but those are planted trees. But in the mountainous area, there's few trees. There's actually just some white birch, and they don't grow very big. So anyway, we're flying past this mountain, big hill, and I'm looking out the window, looking forward out of my airplane window, and alongside the mountain, I can see this huge black thing. I'll start with thing. And I'm like, the first thing that crossed my mind was that it was, when a tree falls down from the big wind and tornado and the uproots, that's what I thought it was. But being a person who I grew up as in the forest, in the woods, bush, when I first seen it, I said, well, there's no trees that big on this mountain. I'm kind of looking at it odd. And then my first thought was, oh well, maybe it's a bear. But then there's snow on the ground, and it's February. If you're familiar, bears are still in hibernation. So I'm looking at it, and now it's kind of almost straight out in front of me, and I seen it stand up, and it was huge. From my point, I would say it was at least the size of the biggest refrigerator you've ever seen, and maybe taller. And I'm still kind of, my mind is racing, thinking, okay, what is this? And then I seen it stand up, and I seen it take a couple of steps, and now my mind is really racing. I'm saying, I'm looking at it, and then it stopped, and it turned, and it looked at the airplane. Now, I'm not sure if it looked at me or if it looked at the airplane. And we were both looking at each other, and how do I explain this? And then time stood still. I don't know how to explain that, but my mind is still working, and it seemed like I didn't hear the airplane. That's the only way I can explain it. It seemed like everything went silent, and I didn't hear the airplane, and I was going to tap wake the guys up, but I thought those guys are going to think I'm crazy. And then I even thought of hollering at the pilots, because they're not very far in front of me, and the airplane that I'm flying in, and the door is open. But I thought the same thing as well, because you got to remember, I'm also a chief of police at the time, and I'm thinking, well, if they don't see what I see, obviously they're going to think, I'm losing it. But that was my sighting, and then it continued to look at me as I was going by, and then having a policing background in mind. The other thing my mind is rushing through is, what is this guy, or what is this guy doing standing on the side of the mountain at 7 o'clock in the morning? It's kind of just breaking daylight. It's daylight enough to see, but it's bright because of all the white snow and the little trees, so I can see it very clearly. What's this? My mind is trying to tell me that it's human, but I'm like, what's this human doing there at 7 o'clock in the morning? Then I'm looking. Then I start to look. Is there a lake nearby? Is there? My calculated brain started to come in, and I'm looking for a road. I'm looking for a snow machine. I'm looking for snowshoe tracks. But it's way up on a mountain. What would somebody be doing up there at 7 o'clock in the morning? And I couldn't find a road nearby. I got out of my seat eventually after I could no longer see what I seen. I actually moved over to the next chair to look out, and I couldn't see a snow machine or a vehicle anywhere nearby. And then we continued on, and we eventually landed, and and that's pretty much my visual story of what I seen.
I think you had these moments of this kind of out of body experience. I think, and I know enough that in Indigenous culture, high vistas and mountains are very important spiritually. I think there could have been some kind of messaging going on there. I've had an experience like this, not to do with Sabe, but in fact, it's been on the Backroads Bill podcast when we talked about the time I was kind of the conduit between a fighter jet pilot who crashed, and I went back to the site north of Constance Lake First Nation, and I was standing on the wing of the bomber. This happened in 1958. I was there just a few years ago, and all of a sudden this moments in time where time stood still, just as you described. And even right now, as I describe it, I'm getting chills because and later on, when I went to at least 3 mediums, they said I was the conduit at that time between the fighter jet pilot, who was never found, and his 4-year-old son, who we were supposed to go up there just recently who just passed away and never got the experience to reunite. But I think there was some sort of spiritual connection, and because you're in tune with your culture and you're an honest person, that was, and everyone else, of course, if anybody else, they'd think you were kind of crazy. I don't think you're crazy at all. I think that something happened at that particular moment in time for you. Maybe that was meant to happen.
Yeah, I believe that myself. I truly believe as a person, I do carry myself very honestly, and I believe that is one of the reasons why that doorway opened to allow me to see such a wonderful figure. At the time, I was excited, but I was also very taken by it, and the unique thing that happens afterwards is that you're always looking afterwards. You're always looking, trying to find that feeling, to try and get that time stand still feeling again. It was a wonderful feeling. I don't want to make it sound like it was scary, or it was a wonderful feeling. I would give anything to have that feeling again of time standing still and seeing what I seen. And,
I would like to do the same. But tell us then, okay, you got off the plane, and of course you weren't telling anyone. So tell us about, and you kept this to yourself. I don't know if you told your immediate family, but why did you keep this secret? It was kind of your secret. When did you first share it, and with whom for the first time?
Well, I did share it shortly afterwards. After I arrived in Sioux Lookout, I had a Native woman who was my administrator for our police office, and so we were. It might have been a day or no more than a day or two afterwards, and I had an opportunity. I believe we had an opportunity to go in and have a coffee in our coffee room, and it was just the two of us. And she was a Native woman, so I felt comfortable to tell her, and I've never told another non-Native person until after last June. All I ever told was Native people about the story, because I know they would believe me. That was one of the reasons why I kind of kept it to myself and shared it only with close family and very close Native friends. Yeah.
But I believe you, and I think that's one of the reasons you're here today, because we share something, and I'm glad you shared this story. And I wish I had some tobacco, because this is a gift. It's a gift, and sometimes in life we don't experience these things. Now, I'm sitting looking across, and we want to know about the hat story for sure. First of all, describe the hat, Ken, and then how you came to acquire it.
It's just it's kind of a normal baseball hat, but I was on a excursion trip, a little bit of a holiday trip in January of this year, and I went down to Roswell, New Mexico, and of course we all know that that's where the UFO Museum is in Roswell. I went into the gift shop, and I found a one of a kind. At the time, there was the only one hat, and it has a beautiful Native design here on the front, and on the peak of it, and on the symbol, there's a Sasquatch walking through the bush. And at the time, there was only one of it at the museum, so I had to have it. I was going to have it no matter what costs, and I wear it proudly.
Of course you do. It spoke to you.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of like, I think, one of those culminating things that even though there was some time went by, but that hat was meant for you, and it was also meant that you were to be here. Now, also tell us a little bit more about the sharing as you I don't want to say gain confidence to share this because it's something that, other things that go bump in the night or things we see outside or something, I don't tell them either. There are stories that I don't tell because, again, people just don't want to believe you. But tell us how you came to, and actually come to this day, but how you started to want to share it, because I think there's some reasoning or meaning behind that as well.
Like I said, I now have a grandson and 2 wonderful sons, and they've grown up knowing that their father and grandfather is a honest, truthful man, and after I retired from my policing career, which was close to 8 years ago, I slowly got into a little more learning about my culture and researching a little bit more and spending more time with quality elders. And last June, on the summer solstice day, I felt it was time. I just felt it was time that because the people who were in the ceremony, at the ceremony, the people that were there were a mixture of elders and youth, and it was a wonderful time to be able to show our honesty and show our truthfulness, and they know that I wouldn't be making up a story like this to tell to my elders or to tell to the people. You only speak honesty in those ceremonies, and after I told the story, it really did feel like I let go a little bit off of my shoulders, because even though it was not something that I was not something I was ashamed of at all, but it was really nice just to let it go and to let other people know that there are things out there that are very mythical or spiritual that need to be understood or need to be accepted.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too, because you have that mindset. I feel like it wouldn't bother you if people go, I don't believe you, right? Because it doesn't matter. It's not about if people believe you or not. It's about the experience that you personally had. And we talked about how, like, Bill, you mentioned, you were meant to be here. Well, the reason you're here right now, we just finished talking to Mark from Waterfalls of Ontario, and this was a off the cusp conversation because you had breakfast with Dave Dale, our content director, and you were wearing that hat. And now the next thing you know, we made this fit in. So it's kind of funny how life works that way. But what do you think? And maybe this is a bit of a too personal question, but that moment, was there a personal significance that moment had that maybe opened your eyes about it, or you think there was a reason why it appeared to you at that time?
Yeah, I think it, like going back, I think it, like I was saying, there's the 7 grandfather teachings of the Ojibwe. Honesty is one of those teachings, and the Sasquatch represents honesty in our teachings, and I think it was just a sign. They allowed me to see him, to let me know that my honesty means something, and it's valued by the spiritual world, and it was, like I said, it was a great honor.
No, I think it was an honor, and I think that's exactly what happened. And I think often about honor, Gord Restoul has passed. He was my first Indigenous mentor, and people often ask me about, what's your highest honor that you've received, or accolades or something, and I don't even think about it. It's when Gord Restoul and Leonard Dokis, who was chief at the time in Dokis First Nation, in a special eagle feather ceremony, which I have and my tobacco pouch, and they bestowed an icon for me and welcomed me into the community. That is my highest honor. But Gord taught me a lot of things about the 7 grandfather teachings that have stayed with me. And in my life, too, I've met other Indigenous people. And I think today is another one of these days where someone's come along and told me something about my life or something I need to think about. And I remember Gord often telling me about things I needed to think about. I think your experience, too, you were being told in a different way about something about you and your life, and now you're telling others as well. But I think it's a great educational opportunity when you tell that story.
I think I would love to be able to see it again. That's I wanted to add that in, was that I'd love to be able to see it again, because that experience is it's such a wonderful experience, at least what I seen it. I don't want to hunt it. I just want to see it again, to be able to get that wonderful feeling. Because I think what happened too was, let's say 2,000 years ago, we were all very mythical, and probably a whole lot more spiritual. But because of different religions and different sciences, it has changed our way of thinking and imagining what our world is really like. So, but if you just allow it to happen, sometimes it just happens in this wonderful way that it happened for me.
Yeah, and it's a different way of looking at it too, because a lot of times when you think, oh, they saw a Sasquatch, you're thinking of like some guy in the woods, and they just see someone. And then they're like, oh yeah, I saw that Sasquatch. And then but to take it from, like in this case where it's a very spiritual thing, it's almost like when people have near death experiences and it's in whatever religion they hold on to, it's like having those moments that are like, they transcend, I guess, just our knowledge of how the world works. And it's a very interesting way of looking at something like Sasquatches, right? And how much it ties into the Indigenous, into your culture and into the spirituality of stuff. It's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and we had Dr. Jonathan Pitt from Nipissing University on, who is Indigenous person, and he talked about that. We were at Memorial Gardens on during the winter time. And I think G. Miigwech for sharing, because these are just one of so many stories that we should hear and learn from, especially from a non-native perspective. But because you've lived in the outside as well and grew up in that environment, it makes, for me, if nothing else, I like that it's outside and there's something outside there and there's a spiritual connection. And so again, G. Miigwech for sharing, Ken.
Okay, well, thank you very much for letting me speak on this today, and I really hope that it helps or affects someone who may be cautious about coming forward to share their story. I hope they feel more comfortable about sharing it, because it's a wonderful thing. And again, like I said, it's what I seen or what I was allowed to see. And I'm very grateful to our spiritual world for allowing me that.
Very much grateful. Thank you.
Well, big thank you to Ken for coming on in kind of, short notice. And you kind of expect, and I said this at the top of the show, but when you hear about Sasquatches, you kind of expect it to be some guy in the woods taking a walk, ends up seeing something that, maybe they're convinced that looks like Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever, or Sabe, depending on how you want to look at it. This one is so interesting though, because of the spiritual undertones and the just the extra piece of, it's not just seeing a Sasquatch. There's so many layers to this story as well. It was fantastic to hear Ken tell his story, and it takes a lot of courage too to tell a story like that. It's obviously very personal, can make people think differently of you. So it was awesome there to get a chance to sit there and listen to Ken's experience that he had. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can always find more of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast players, with, of course, the video version being on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel. with new episodes coming out every single Wednesday morning. You can also find it on NorthBayEcho.ca, where you can find a bunch of other great local North Bay podcasts. Of course, one of the big topics lately in the community has been PFAS and how it's affecting us. It's even got national coverage from CTV and other news outlets. Well, we did on the Echo Essentials podcast sit down with Karen Pratt, who is the North Bay's Senior Environment and Facilities Engineer, to discuss the city's role. And of course, they just had that open house at Memorial Gardens earlier last week. So you can find that conversation that Dave and Scott had with Karen over on the Echo Essentials podcast, which of course you can find on the North Bay Echo website. And while you're also there, if you want to keep up to date with the ongoings of the Echo Podcast Network and the city of North Bay, check out our newsletter, Echo Essentials, which is free and comes to your inbox every single Tuesday and Thursday. Well, that just about wraps things up for us. Come back next Wednesday for another story and yet another Backroads adventure.